I'm Mark Waite, and I want to thank you very much for joining me for another whiskey study. This is another special edition. We're going to be looking at three brands or three expressions from the Springbank Distillery from Campbellton. The first is going to be the Hazelburn 12, the second will be the Springbank 15, and the third will be the Longrow. But before we get into any of these whiskeys, here are my notes on Springbank Distillery.
Springbank Distillery is located on the edge of Campbellton Loch, towards the bottom of the Mull of Kintyre in the west of Scotland, about 3 hours' drive southwest from Glasgow. Springbank Distillery brands. The distillery produces three types of peated and unpeated malt whiskey that it bottles under three distinct brands: Hazelburn single malt, Springbank single malt, and Longrow single malt. Springbank was established in 1828 on the site of Archibald Mitchell's illicit still. It is one of the last surviving producers of single malt whiskies in Campbellton, an area that was once home to over 30 active distilleries. Springbank is owned by J.A. Mitchell and Company, who also owns Glengyle Distillery, the oldest independent bottler, William Cadshead, and several blended Scotch labels. Today, Springbank is run by Hedgley G. Wright, Mitchell's great-great-grandson, the fifth generation of the Mitchell family to own and manage Springbank. Springbank uses traditional production methods, and 100% of this process is carried out on site. It is the only Scottish distillery to perform every step in the whiskey-making process, from malting the barley to bottling the spirit. This gives them complete control over the quality of the whiskey. Springbank then dries its barley using peat sourced from Islay for various lengths of time, 30 to 48 hours, to imbue different levels of the smoky flavor associated with Scottish whiskey. Unpeated malt becomes Hazelburn, whereas medium peated and heavily peated malts become the distillery Springbank and Longrow labels. Once dried, the barley is ground into grist, mashed into warm water to extract the barley sugars, and fermented for 72 to 110 hours in cast iron open top mash tuns. This long fermentation period allows for the formation of esters that shape the fruity secondary characteristics that help make the identity of the final product. The liquid, essentially now beer, goes into the stills for the distillation phase. Springbank uses three copper stills, one using direct fire, the other two using steam, used in various combinations to produce its malts. Hazelburn unpeated is triple distilled to produce a lighter, higher ABV end product of 74 to 76% alcohol by volume. The medium peated Springbank is 2.5 times distilled. During the distillation process, some of the low wines are collected before the second distillation, and then mixed back into the faints for another distillation. This means that some parts of the spirit have been through the stills twice, and some parts 3 times, hence the half distillation. The amount of spirit that goes through the half time is judged by the stillman as the process takes place to ensure consistency. It is distilled to approximately 71 to 72% alcohol by volume. The heavily peated Longrow is double distilled, leaving a heavier, smoky distillate that leaves the still at 68% alcohol by volume. The distillery employs traditional worm tub condensers, which limit copper contact and make for a richer, oilier spirit. All of the malts produced at this distillery are non-chill filtered and have no added colorants, such as caramel E150. The majority of its distillate is bottled as a single malt, with a small percentage sold to larger blenders or ending up in one of J&A Mitchell's own blended Scotch labels, such as Campbellton Loch.
Alrighty, so in these three expressions from Springbank Distillery, we're starting off with the Hazelburn 12. The Hazelburn 12 and the Springbank 15 are in the form of these little minis. The Longrow will come from a full-size bottle. But before we get into this mini of the Hazelburn, here are my notes on Hazelburn.
Hazelburn single malt. Hazelburn is a triple distilled non-peated whiskey. Hazelburn is named for a mothball distillery of the same name. The original distillery in Campbellton was in operation between 1825 In 1925, the distillery was bought by Mitchell & Company in 1920 but shut down in 1926. Since 2005, Springbank Distillery bottles a whiskey called Hazelburn Single Malt. It was first distilled in 1997 and since bottled as a 10-year-old. In 2009, a 12-year-old variety was released. Hazelburn is a triple distilled, non-peated whiskey. Did you catch the fact that it's a triple distilled, non-peated whiskey? Because I think I mentioned it at least 3 times in the video so far.
Alrighty. I'm only going to pour about half of this mini. It is bottled at 46% alcohol by volume. Sort of a medium intense amber there. On the nose, whiskey's clean. That means there isn't any faults. I don't find whiskeys to have as many faults as wines do. Typically wines, you're looking at cork taint, looking perhaps volatile acidity. There could be extra sulfur or something like that. Usually whiskey is going to be fine unless it's been open for a long period of time, which might get some oxidative notes. You could also get some sulfur and stuff like that, but a little mini like this should be fine. So medium intense aromas of green apple, some light stone fruits, dried stone fruits, citrus, hints of spice, some caramel, not quite caramel, scratch that, closer to toffee, a little bit of dates, raisins. So for stone fruit, I get dried peach, dried pear, a little bit of lemon and lime, green apple, actually there's a hint of caramel. There's a tangy note to it. Spice would be cinnamon, cardamom, a little bit of ginger. All right, on the palate. That is nice. Let's say overall, the whiskey seems very lively, fresh, tangy. Got a little bit of a sting, a bite to it in the middle, a lot of spice. But up front, I get dried peach, dried pear. There's a tangy citrus character to it, a little bit of nuttiness to it. A little bit of the toffee, caramel, some vanilla, and distinct woodiness. There's a wood character to it. It's as if you're sort of, sucking alcohol through some wood. And that's what really sticks around. So you get some fruit up front, some caramel notes in the middle, and just these sort of solid woody notes. And I would think that woody notes is also what's supplying a little bit of nuttiness. So you think of something that's, and this is not oxidative, but oxidative wines can remind you of wood. Dried fruits can remind you of something that's oxidative. In other words, it's not so fresh on those notes. And yet it seemed this sort of lively, fresh fruit up front, and then that sort of fades into these wood, tangy, dried fruit, caramel, toffee, nutty characters. And then the spiciness that sort of really lingers. Ginger, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. Overall, gotta say this is quite nice. I like it a lot. And there's a little bit of the sort of dates, raisins, and those dried notes on the back end as well. Prunes. It's not totally dry. It's not totally sweet. It's somewhere in the middle. I think it's well balanced. I like the development. I like the complexity of it. I think this is really nice. Score-wise, I'll give it a solid 88 points. Alrighty, let's move on to the next one. Our next one will be the Springbank 15.
Springbank Single Malt. This is a 15-year-old medium peated whiskey distilled 2.5 times, bottled at 46% alcohol by volume. They also produce a cask strength 10-year-old bottling, as well as 12-year, 18-year, and 21-year bottlings. The distillery also releases wine cask matured editions on a regular basis.
Alrighty, so I went ahead and poured about half the 50 CL mini here of the Springbank 15. Color-wise, very similar to the Hazelburn. Sort of medium intense copper. On the nose, it's clean. The aromas are not as pronounced as the Hazelburn. Again, medium intense aromas of dried stone fruit, a little more dried leaf character. There's sort of a slight medicinal note to it. Not the way Lafroig is. It's more like, before you get your inoculation and they rub your arm down with some rubbing alcohol with a little pad and they give you your inoculation or whatever, or take a blood sample. This is like a medium minus intensity. It's just really hard to get anything out of it. Hoping a little more rolling around, a little more aeration might help out. So again, dried stone fruit, maybe dried peach, dried pear, slight caramel notes, slight nuttiness, a little bit of chocolate notes. I'm going to put more into the dram and see if that helps. More into the glass. Just really surprised at how challenging it is to get aromas out of it. A little bit of citrus, a little nuttiness, a little dried florals, a little leafiness, sort of dried leaves. It's just not really pronounced on the nose. I was just getting a lot more out of the Hazelburn. All right, on the palate. While it might not be totally revealing itself on the nose, it definitely is on the palate. So actually, on the palate, it's a lot more pronounced on the palate than the Hazelburn 12 was on the nose or the palate. It just wasn't coming up out of the glass. On the nose, maybe a drop of water would help, but I'm not going to go there. I like it the way it is. So on the palate, I get dried stone fruits, maybe dried peach, dried pear, kind of a thing. I get a chocolatiness to it.
I get a lot of woody notes to it. Get some vanilla, some hints of spice. I say definitely. It's almost a corn type note, something you might more expect out of a bourbon, but it doesn't have the sweetness of a typical bourbon. A little bit of spice, nutmeg, cinnamon, clove. And the flavors are a lot more intense and concentrated than the Hazelburn. And it seems more focused, particularly on the mid palate. It doesn't have as much of a spike in the mid palate in terms of like a spice, alcohol spice spike in the middle. But I wouldn't necessarily call it really smooth either. What sticks around on the finish, sort of the toffee notes along with a lot of wood vanilla, and the lingering ginger, nutmeg, and vanilla and so forth. Between the two, I like the nose of the Hazelburn more, but I like the Springbank on the palate a lot more. It's almost like the Springbank on the palate is just like the Hazelburn, but the volume has been turned up a little bit. Alrighty, so we are done with these two minis. Now we're going to move on to the full-size bottle of the Longrow.
Longrow Single Malt, a highly peated, double-distilled whiskey named for a mothball distillery of the same name. The standard bottling bears no age statement, with age statement bearing additions experimenting with different casks such as Tokai and Barolo. The red edition, released annually, uses a different type of wine cask each year, such as Pinot Noir, Malbec, and Port.
Alrighty, now for the whiskey that I have been waiting for in this study, the Longrow non-age statement. As stated in the notes, they will do wine finished bottlings of this, different each year. This year is a Malbec, and it's the Malbec 13. That is currently out. The only two Longrows that are available here are this Longrow non-age statement, which goes for around $51, $52, and the Malbec 13 goes for about $110, so more than twice the price. So since it's not available in a mini, and I'm spending some money on a whiskey I haven't had before, I went with the non-age statement. Now, the notes said that it is a highly peated whiskey. Now, for me, when I think highly peated, I think of Islay, and I think of Laphroaig, I think of Ardbeg, and so I really want to test that in comparing this with an Islay peated whiskey. Let's get into it. All right, color-wise, nice, bright, shiny, light gold and copper in color. On the nose, it is clean, really fresh, fruity, orange, peach, a little bit of apricot, a lot of honey. I would say it's medium to medium minus in peatiness. Take a Laphroaig, take an Ardbeg, take Coila, take Bunnahabhain. Take any Islay peated whiskey, put it next to this, and they're all going to be more heavily peated than this. This is not, at least thus far I can tell on the nose, a highly peated whiskey. The fruit character is actually sort of candied orange, candied lemon, candied peach, maybe a little bit of lemon and lime, a little bit of soft caramel, just a whiff of peat. And also, of course, in comparison to Laphroaig or Ardbeg or any of the Islay whiskeys, it doesn't have the briny notes that you typically get from a lot of those whiskeys. It doesn't have that salty sea breeze character you can get from a lot of those whiskeys. A little bit of vanilla, a little bit of cardamom. So it's actually quite candied on the nose with just a little bit of peat. All right, let's try it on the palate.
That is tasty. Thus far, I can say it's delicious. Let's try another one. All right, on the palate, the nose is confirmed. It has a little sweetness to it, and it has some richness to it. So I'm going candied pear, candied peach, candied apple, a little bit of citrus, lemon, and lime, and then I would say just a bare whiff of smoke sort of following it up. It's got a little bit of spice, baking spices, vanilla, cardamom, cinnamon. And what sticks around is some slight sugary candied notes and some peat. While this may be highly peated in comparison to the other Springbank brands, it's not a highly peated whiskey. It has just a touch, just a kiss of smoke, and I really, really like that. For me, when I think after dinner whiskey, this is what I like. You know, you like something a little sweet. Some people will have a little ice cream, some people have a little sorbet, maybe people have coffee or something like that, but this little bit of sweetness for a whiskey is really, really nice. Now, it's somewhat light as well. It's not as light as, say, Glencaddam. Glencaddam, I found them all to be really, really light, low intensity of flavor. This is a little more intense than that, but not much. So it's a nice, I would say, after dinner whiskey with just a touch of smoke. If someone has never had a peated or smoked flavored whiskey, this I think could be a good place to start, because I think that sweetness is just really, really delicious. It's got a nice round mouthfeel. It's smooth across the middle. The bite is minimum. Really, really nice. So for this style, and yet it's not quite a dessert whiskey as well, even though it has some sweetness going on. So it's not that far. It's sort of, I would say, medium sweetness to it. So score-wise, I'm going to give it 89 points. I really, really like it. And of the three whiskeys that I tried, I like this one the most. The Springbank and the Hazelburn, I would say, were very dry. No sweetness really at all. And they both tend to have a lot more sort of dry, leafy notes to it. I would almost describe them as being your grandpa's whiskey, where this is something I think younger people or a newer generation, next generation, they're probably going to be more geared towards something like this. All right, that's it for this study. I want to thank you very much for everybody who is tuned in. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed. I would greatly appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking channels. And I want to give a shout out to a few more whiskey reviewers out there, particularly Jason Whiskey Wise. A real sharp dressing gentleman. He's probably the snazziest dresser of all the whiskey tubers, so you definitely want to check him out. I like there's a clarity and cleanness and precision to his reviews. I really like them a lot. And I want to recommend, also check out, goes by Food Quick. I don't know what his real name is. Food Quick is much more your next door neighbor, everyday Joe kind of guy. The guys, I like his descriptions of whiskeys. I like his personality that comes across in his reviews. And when he does live shows, he's quite a hoot. In fact, I've been inspired by him, but one of his videos, his live shows, to try something in one of my future live shows. But you'll have to stay tuned for that. All right, that's it for this review. Until next time, cheers.